Hello and welcome. So today I wanted to talk a bit about ROI apps, which are very popular and I think are quite interesting at the moment. But there's also a lot of misunderstanding and misconception about what they actually are and how they work and what they do. So really, I wanted to talk about what are they? Are they a Ponzi scheme? How risky are they to invest in? So if that sounds interesting, keep watching. I'm not here to sell any of these apps or to try to get you to use them. Just trying to really explain what I'm doing and hopefully give you enough background to make your own judgment on risk. That being said, if you do want to use one of these, I've got my referral links in the description. And of course, this is not financial advice. This is information purposes only, and I'm really just talking about my own research and my own strategy here. So, as always, invest in these things at your own risk. So I think to understand what a whether one of these ROI apps are Ponzi schemes, we need to first understand what a Ponzi scheme is and how it works. And the term Ponzi scheme is fairly overused. People are talking about the US dollar is a Ponzi scheme, and anything is a Ponzi scheme basically if you look at it long enough. But to try and understand what a Ponzi scheme is and whether these ROI apps are in fact Ponzi schemes, let's look at an example. So I'll just point you over to this area of the spreadsheet here. Essentially, let's break down a Ponzi scheme and how it works. So for here, we'll assume a Ponzi scheme that says if you invest in this scheme, I will give you 20% return. So 120% of your initial investment after a certain period of time. So person one comes along and they deposit $100. And then in a couple of weeks, you get person two puts in $100, person three puts in $100. So the contract is, and I'm calling this contract as to create the analogy with the smart contract here, but in the Ponzi scheme at the moment, there's $300 invested. Now, what happens is after a period of time, person one wants to cash out their investment, and they're given the promised $120. That's the 20% return on their investment out of the total contract value. And some time down the line, person two is also eligible to take out their returns. They also take out $120. Now there's $60 left in the contract or in the Ponzi scheme. Now say these two people tell everyone, "Hey, I've got a great investment. I put in $100. I got out $120. It's easy money, 20% return on investment. Tell all your friends," and they get a bunch of people to sign up. So now we've got 7 people in the contract. We've got these two initial withdrawals out, and we've got $460 in the contract. And so now person 3 wants to cash out. They get out their 120. Person 4 gets out their 120, and so on. So what you can see from this is that I think that the takeaways are that there is no actual investment here. There's no money working in the background to create any sort of wealth. This is not like, I guess, a bank account where you have loans that the bank is taking out and then returning interest, and you're actually making money that is created somehow in the system. There's no creation of wealth here. What's happening is it's a redistribution where people who arrive later in the chain are subsidizing people who arrive earlier. So yes, these people are making money. So person 1, 2, 3, and 4 are making money. But as you can see, even at this point in the contract, there's $220 in the contract, and 3 people have invested $100. So if no more people invest, these people are not going to get their money back. The first person is going to get 120, and then the second person may get out their initial investment, and then the third person here is completely out of pocket. So the way a Ponzi scheme works is by using people who come in later to pay for people who are already in the Ponzi scheme. and that it relies on more and more people coming in order to redistribute that initial money back to the people who were in sooner. And when no more people want to invest in the Ponzi scheme, that's when it collapses, and the people who are last in the chain are the people who get left out. So when you look at risk of a Ponzi scheme, I think when we're talking about this in the context of ROI apps and whether they're worthwhile investing in, if an ROI app is a Ponzi scheme, you think of it in terms of, well, if you're an early investor, you can make money, and if you're a late investor, you will likely lose money, and that's really the risk calculation in these ROI apps, which, as I'm implying, are Ponzi schemes, and we'll explain that in a second as well. So, to talk about the risk and the sustainability of an app or a Ponzi scheme, look at the rate of return. So, if the return rate is 120%, so you get as an investor you get 20% back of your initial investment. So, say you put in $100, you get 120 out. In order to sustain that, to pay out 5 investors, you need 1 investor to essentially lose out. You take this calculation up to the point that we have it here. To pay these 5 people, you have this person here who's not making any money, essentially paying the $20. 5 times 20 is 100 for these people to actually get paid out. So for every 5 people, you need another person to come onto the Ponzi scheme to pay for that person. The more the return rate goes up, the higher that ratio becomes. So if it's 125%, so 25% on your initial investment, you need 1 person to essentially be the sucker to pay for 4 people's returns. If it's 150%, it's 2 to 1, and if it's 200%, you essentially need to double the amount of people in your scheme to keep paying out profits, and that's assuming everyone has equal deposits. So that's when you look at sustainability of these apps, it's really important to look at what kind of returns you're getting and whether this is likely to sustain. So are ROI apps Ponzi schemes? The answer, in my opinion, is 100% yes, and it's easy to see when you look at how they work, and it's in the smart contract and it's in the audits themselves. So you need to understand when you're getting into one of these that it is a Ponzi scheme. It doesn't mean you're going to lose your money, and that also, in my opinion, doesn't mean it's not worth investing in them. You just need to do it with the knowledge and the understanding of what you're actually investing in. So essentially the hallmarks and how these schemes work and how these apps all work is they do the same thing. They take your deposit, they don't do anything with it. They will lock it in for a period of time, say 14 days or whatever it happens to be, and pay you a ROI, a return on that investment that you can get either at the end of a period or daily. And the view is the more people get in that, the new deposits start paying back the returns, and eventually, at some point, just by the nature of this, it's all going to collapse. So you need to understand that all of these ROIs are going to eventually stop working, and the point at which that happens is going to depend on the return rate as to how sustainable they are. So let's take a look at some of these ROI apps and how they work, and assess if they're Ponzi schemes or not, and essentially that they are all fundamentally the same. So if we look at Stable One, what you do is you make a deposit of a certain number of Matic, and every day you get 7% back in that from your investment. So you never get your initial investment back. That's locked. That is a deposit in the system. You never actually get it back. What you get is withdrawals of 7%, and they add up to a certain percentage. So let's look at this calculator. So say I put in $100, I will get $165.90 back, and there are all sorts of little tricks in this that a certain percentage of this 7% gets reinvested, but it's fundamentally you put in $100, you get $165 back, and there's no value being created. That $165, that extra $65 is coming back out of other people who are depositing after you. And that's just how it works. So eventually, at some point, people stop investing, and then you're going to have a hard time getting your initial investment out because there's no other way that money is coming into this system apart from deposits. So you've got 165% essentially return on investment. That helps you understand the risk around stable one. So 165% is above 150. So you need basically to support two people. You need one person essentially coming on to be the sucker. And actually, let's talk about how you identify these ROI apps. So the easiest way is to look at the security, the audit trail. So this is the audit trail for Stable One, audited by Hayes Crypto. You can see one high issue here, and that high issue is it's an ROI app. And if you read the description, users' principals cannot be withdrawn. Users get dividends and referral commissions. Dividends are paid from deposits of other users. So 100% this is saying, hey, this is a Ponzi scheme. There's no method for actually creating value. What is happening is you are getting dividends paid out of deposits from other users. So just go into that knowing that that is actually what's happening here. So Stable One, apart from all the differences in how these apps work, they're fundamentally the same. You're getting 165% back. I think one factor in favor of the approach that Stable One has is that you can withdraw on a daily basis and you can start to get some of your initial deposit out, or essentially you get your returns out, and then you decrease your risk. So once obviously you start getting your returns out, after a certain number of days you've got $100 out, and you're essentially risk free for the remaining $65. If the whole thing goes under, you're not behind. So this kind of daily withdrawal is one way of reducing risk. Let's have a look at Maticstaker. And Maticstaker is very popular at the moment, and as I mentioned in my last video, I've managed to put in some money and get a return out, and I put some more money in, essentially the same thing again, and we'll see if it lasts long enough to get a return out. Maticstaker, what I do appreciate about it is its simplicity. I mean, there are a lot of different packages here, and that can be confusing in terms of ROI and risk and return. So you're going to get the most returns out of the platinum overall if you put in $100 in 28 days. You're going to get $4,500 back. But this should tell you a few things. If your ROI is 4,000%, let's go back to the risk sustainability. This is off the charts. So to get 4,000% return, you need a lot of people coming onto this platform, depositing money, hoping they're going to get returns. So this is not sustainable whatsoever. So if you're looking at the risk versus benefit here, definitely Maticstaker has a lot of benefit. I have at the moment 24 Matic invested. I'm hoping to get 160 out of it. And if that doesn't happen within the next 10 days, the whole thing goes under. Well, I'm out 24 Matic on that. So that's the risk of these essentially Ponzi schemes. Matic is probably the highest risk at the moment of the ones that I've seen, just because their returns have been so high. It started a few weeks back at about 9%, I think, daily earnings, which is more in line with what some of the other ones like Stable One are doing. They're increasing these daily earnings every day, and it's gotten to the point where you have to wonder how long this can sustain. So look, I'd say if you're getting into Maticstaker, there's some potential there for sure, but how long this is going to last, I don't know. And of course, what happens when it doesn't last? We go back to here. The well dries up, and anyone who invested after a certain point basically loses their investment and stops getting paid out. Next one I have is Maticfomo. This is quite similar to Maticstaker in terms of the way it works. You essentially put money in and you hold it for a certain number of days, and after the end of the period, you get a payout. So I think you look at the daily earnings here, 17.7%, 17.4%. They're very similar, 14%. They're very similar to Maticstaker. So I'd say that you're looking at a similar kind of risk profile as Maticstaker as well. Um, Look, there are others. I don't necessarily want to just kind of go into all of these, but Multimatic here is a new one. You have a similar kind of approach as Stable One, where you do get a daily return, I believe. I'm not sure if I haven't used this one. I'm not sure if it's actually locked in for this period of time and you get it back. But I think there's a withdrawal possibility there on that one. Actually, I think, sorry, going back to Maticfomo, I put some Matic in this one this morning, but I think there's given there's a hold bonus, I think there might be a daily withdrawal on that one. We'll see how it goes. But anyway, if there is a daily withdrawal, that's a positive in terms of risk because you're able to at least get back some of your initial investment before the whole thing goes under. A couple of other ones, Matic Heaven. This one looks like probably a lower risk, just given, for example, that the return here, your total return is 136%. So that's a lot more for this 8 days. That's a lot more sustainable, definitely. 136 is, around the 3-to-1 ratio. That is a lot more sustainable than some of these other ones. And that 60-day period, for example, is, I would not go into any of these for 60 days. 60 days is a ridiculous amount of time to expect one of these to last. So I would always go for short-term investments. And I think this is a new one about to launch. Looks like in the next 10 hours, Daily Matic. So yet another ROI app. So there's different ways they manifest and different ways they kind of um, control the investment. And when you look at things like 14 days and 21 days and 28 days, it's made to look like an investment app. So when you stake a coin, or even when you go to the bank and put money in a term deposit, that money does something for that period of time, and at the end of that period of time, you get an investment out, and everyone gets their investment out after that certain amount of time because it's completely sustainable. What you have here is just the appearance of an investment. This term doesn't serve any functional reason apart from just to prolong the contract. They could have made this, hey, you put your money in, you get it back straight away with whatever extra percentage you wanted. But without that time period, the contract's going to burn itself out very quickly because people are going to dump money in, get money out. It'll be all over in a few days, if not sooner. This at least gives a longer period of time for more people to come onto the contract to start investing. And you can see one of the other hallmarks of these ROI/Ponzi schemes is the referral link, because they want people to keep coming in. They want people to keep putting money into them to keep them going as long as possible, basically. Um, so I guess the next question is, now that you know that these are essentially Ponzi schemes by definition, I would say there's not much of a difference between how I've outlined a Ponzi scheme works and how these ROI apps work. They basically use your later deposits to pay for early withdrawals, and they burn out once you start running out of new people to enter it. So one way that you can assess the risk of this, as well as the return rate and the ratio of new investments to old investments that you know is needed, you can have a look at how much is in the contract. So we can see this for Maticstaker, for Stable One. Here we go. So total invested in the contract, it's the current contract balance that you want to look at. So total investment invested, this is how much has been put into it, 0.12 million Matic has been invested through the life of the contract. But the balance is only 192,000, and that's because the rest of that 7 million, which is just under 7 million actually, has already been paid out to investors. Those are the early investors who've gotten their money out. So generally, if you look at this balance, if it's going up, that means that the new people signing up exceed the old people cashing out, and that's a sign that there is some life left in it. But if you look at that balance and it's low and there's not many people coming onto it, then that's a sign that things are going to start collapsing. So looking at Maticstaker, surprisingly, Maticstaker has a lot in the contract, 4 million in the contract, but it's difficult to work out how much that is compared to how much. Here we go. Staked amount 9 million staked. Total contract balance 4 million. So that looks like it may have some life in it, but it's without having access to what the database looks like. You just don't know when those deposit terms are going to come up, and you don't know how the ability of the contract to actually pay out to those deposits. So if people are coming in expecting 879% return on investment, so you actually need a lot more. So if you just imagine 9 million staked, and let's just call it 10 million for ease of maths, and you expecting a return on investment of 879%, then you need essentially 87.9 million in this contract to pay everyone, and there's only 4 million. So 87.9 million needed, 4 million available. A lot of people are going to lose money. It depends how far along in the staking process they are, as to whether people get paid out and how much more money comes into this contract in the meantime. So that's where the risk is and how to assess that. You can look at these yourselves to work out the ratio between the total staked and the total amount in the contract, which is probably somewhere on this page for each one that you're entering. And the closer those ratios are, the closer you are, the lower the risk. But essentially, you have to go on the assumption that essentially these will all collapse, but the return rate is going to essentially mean that it collapses faster. So you've got one of these apps at 120% return, it's going to hang around for much longer than 200%. And if you've got one at 800%, it's gonna crash a lot quicker than any of those. So when it comes to strategy, we can talk about whether or not it's might be profitable to invest in some of these. So as I've said, I've put some into Maticstaker and then taken out some profits, put it back into Maticstaker, and then put a little bit into some of these others. Look, my simplified strategy, if I take it here, is to essentially, number one, spread the risk. So let's say we've got $100 to invest. We spread it between 5 ROI apps. You're expecting a return of $20. So under that scenario, so period one, let's say everything goes well, you actually get your return of $200. And this is, I'm assuming, between the apps that I've selected, basically the return rate per period, say 14 days, is double your money. So assuming that everything goes well, you get $200, and then essentially you can take out $100 profit, and now you're at even risk. So you've got no risks. You go back in, invest in either the same, depending on whether you think they're sustainable, or some other apps distributed along. You do the same thing, and the important thing is to keep taking profits, and eventually some of these will start dying. So maybe on the third round you're expecting the same profits again, but actually what's happened is two of them have gone under and you're not getting your money back. So you made a return of 120. So you essentially take out your 20, that's your profit, and you go back in to another 5, And hopefully, as long as 3 out of 5 survive, you're ahead. But if more than 3 go down, then you've got $80 and you're essentially down, so you're not taking any profit. And you probably want to invest only 80 next time around. But I think as long as you've seen the initial return and as long as you're taking profit out, again, your risk is pretty low. So understand this is a way I'm looking at of just controlling risk, because you know the risk of eventually these platforms collapsing and not being able to pay out. That risk is 100%. So the question is, how long can they sustain the returns for? And I think you can't really predict that necessarily unless you have really great modeling. Maybe you can get a lot closer. Um, but I think this approach of just choosing uh, newer apps over older ones and controlling your risk, never just kind of, if you were to go at the end of period 1, take no profits and then dump it all back into these apps on period 2, then you're essentially doubling your risk. Here you take some profit, and then after period 2 you've got no risk because your initial $100 is already taken out, and then you're essentially just playing with free money. So any further profit you make, you take out, and you keep reinvesting your initial or something close to that. So that's my strategy. That's how I kind of approaching these ROI slash Ponzi apps. I think there is some money to be made. There's obviously risk, and I think at least the risk when it comes to these apps is very straightforward and understandable. You know that the risk is essentially the whole thing falls apart. And I think if you find ways of controlling that risk, making sure you're not too exposed, then I think you can probably do well from these. And time will tell. I'll give you all an update at the end of the month in terms of whether that's been profitable or not for me. But I tend to prefer this, the simplicity and your ability to control the risk here, more than some of these other what I call degen or high risk investments I've been involved in, like um, Titano or Libero or others, where you're exposed. The risk is different. You're exposed more to a fluctuating, a very volatile underlying coin that is very likely to go under and just decrease in value. So you don't really have a reliable gauge for how much gain you're going to get. So you know what the risk is. The risk is that coin could go down to zero, but you don't know what the gain is going to be like, and you're kind of guessing that. So that's why I do find some value in these ROI apps, because you can get a clear picture of what your risk to reward ratio is. You know how much you're going to get out, assuming it doesn't collapse, and you know the likelihood of eventual collapse to some degree, so you can take a controlled risk. Anyway, hope that was helpful. Let me know if you've got any thoughts about these in the comments, and otherwise, I'll see you in the next video.